Picture this. You wake up in a sterile hospital room, and the person claiming to be your mother is a complete stranger. Your boyfriend. Never seen him before. Your best friends. Total mystery. But here is the twist that'll blow your mind, shoo-in. They all claim to know exactly who you are, yet each one paints a completely different picture of your personality. Welcome to the most terrifying identity crisis you never knew could happen. Let me take you into Claire's world. A 20-something woman whose night out in Austin, Texas, turned into a psychological nightmare that challenges everything we think we know about identity, memory, and trust. It started like any typical Friday night. Claire was hanging out with her friends, Shannon and Mary, plus her boyfriend Chris, bouncing between downtown bars, but somewhere between the laughter and the drinks, everything went sideways. The next thing Claire knew, she was staring into blinding hospital lights, completely disoriented, with zero memory of how she got there. Now, here is where things get interesting. The doctor explained that Claire had been in a coma for 6 days after suffering severe head trauma. But this wasn't just any ordinary head injury. Claire had developed retrograde amnesia, a condition that completely wiped out her episodic memory. Think of it like your brain's hard drive getting completely reformatted, but somehow keeping the operating system intact. Here is what makes retrograde amnesia so fascinating and terrifying. Claire could still speak, understand complex concepts, and learn new information perfectly fine. Her procedural memory fine. The part that handles skills and basic functions, Fordy, remained completely intact. But everything that made her, sorty every relationship, every defining moment, Fordy had vanished into thin air. So Claire did what anyone in her situation would do. She started asking the people closest to her a simple question: who am I? And that is when things got really weird. First up was her mother, painting Claire as a shy, quiet person who loved luxury and big experiences, but would never start trouble. According to Mom, Claire was sweet, non-confrontational, and only got involved in the bar fight because she was protecting her friend Mary. But then, her sister Sammy showed up with a completely different story. "If I know you at all, you definitely started that fight," she laughed. "You've always been a troublemaker, always ready to fight." Wait, what? Same person, completely opposite description. Then Chris, her boyfriend, added another layer to the confusion. He described Claire as someone who loved alone time and simple pleasures, but was also impulsive, defensive, and sometimes liked stirring up drama just to see what would happen. Oh, and according to Chris, Claire absolutely started that bar fight by confronting 2 random women who weren't even looking at her. By now, you are probably thinking, okay, maybe her boyfriend knows her best. But hold on, Futon, we're not done yet. Mary, supposedly Claire's best friend since high school, had yet another version. She painted Claire as tough, outgoing, adventurous, and confident Futa, someone who doesn't take anyone's crap and is down for anything. But in Mary's version of the bar fight, those other women attacked Mary first, and Claire was just defending her friend. Finally, Shannon Suvin, the friend who was actually there that night, who described Claire as kind, smart, pragmatic, and careful. Someone who thinks before acting and doesn't like drama or risky situations. In Shannon's version, the whole fight was just a big misunderstanding, and Claire got caught in the middle while trying to stop it. Let's pause here for a second. 5 people who supposedly know Claire intimately just gave us 5 completely different personalities. The shy luxury lover who avoids conflict, the aggressive troublemaker who starts fights, the impulsive loner who stirs up drama for fun, the tough, outgoing risk-taker who protects her friends, the careful, pragmatic peacemaker who got caught in the crossfire. How is this even possible? Here is where your mind should be completely blown. This isn't just a story about amnesia. This is a mirror reflecting something disturbing about how we construct identity and how the people around us shape who we think we are. Think about it. If someone asked your closest friends and family to describe you right now, how consistent would their answers be? Would your work colleagues describe the same person as your college friends? Would your parents see the same personality traits as your romantic partner? The truth is, we're all different people to different individuals in our lives. Your mum sees the version of you that calls home and shares family memories. Your friends see the version that lets loose and has fun. Your partner sees your intimate, vulnerable side. Your co-workers see your professional persona. But here is the kicker 7. We usually have our own continuous memory to tie all these different versions together into one coherent sense of self. Claire didn't have that luxury. She was completely dependent on other people's perceptions to rebuild her identity. And those perceptions were wildly inconsistent. This raises some mind-bending questions. Which version of Claire was real? Were they all real? Or were some of these people projecting their own assumptions, biases, or even deliberately manipulating her vulnerable state? Let's dig deeper into each person's motivation. Her mother might have been trying to protect Claire by emphasizing her more gentle qualities, downplaying any troublesome aspects of her personality. Parents often see idealized versions of their children, especially when they're hurt and vulnerable. Her sister Sammy might have been more honest about Claire's flaws, but siblings often focus on the annoying or competitive aspects of each other's personalities. Plus, calling someone a troublemaker when they're lying in a hospital bed recovering from head trauma, that is either brutally honest or kind of cruel. Chris, the boyfriend, gave probably the most complex description, footy, acknowledging both positive and negative traits. But boyfriends also have their own biases. Maybe he was trying to justify why he was attracted to someone who sometimes caused drama. Or maybe he was being more honest, because romantic partners often see us at our most unguarded moments. Mary painted Claire as a loyal friend and party companion, but best friends sometimes enable each other's worst behaviors. If Mary was the type who liked to party and take risks, she might have emphasized those qualities in Claire, because that is the version of her friend she enjoyed most. Shannon's description was the most charitable toward the bar fight situation, but she might have felt guilty about what happened. If you were there when your friend got hurt, wouldn't you want to minimize any suggestion that she brought it on herself? Here is what makes this situation absolutely fascinating from a psychological perspective. Claire was essentially crowdsourcing her identity from multiple unreliable narrators. Each person had their own relationship with her, their own memories, their own biases, and their own reasons for emphasizing certain aspects of her personality over others. But there is an even darker possibility lurking beneath the surface. What if some of these people were intentionally lying or manipulating the situation? Think about it, fortunately vulnerable and dependent on others for information about her own life. She had no way to verify anything anyone told her. This is actually a form of psychological vulnerability that could be exploited by someone with bad intentions. Maybe Chris was an abusive boyfriend trying to gaslight her into thinking she was naturally impulsive and defensive, so she'd be more likely to accept his controlling behavior. Maybe Mary was a toxic friend who wanted to maintain their party lifestyle, so she emphasized Claire's adventurous side while downplaying her more thoughtful qualities. Or maybe Thuti, and this is even more disturbing, Footy, the bar fight didn't happen the way anyone described it. Maybe Claire was assaulted, and everyone was covering it up for their own reasons. Without her memory, she'd have no way to know the truth. This brings us to one of the most terrifying aspects of identity. How much of who we are depends on other people's validation and reinforcement of our self-concept. We think we know ourselves independently, but the reality is that our sense of identity is constantly being shaped and reinforced by the people around us. When someone tells you, "That is so typical of you," or "You always do that," they're not just making an observation, they're actively participating in the construction of your identity. Over time, we internalize these external perceptions, and they become part of our self-concept. But what happens when those external perceptions conflict with each other? What happens when the people who supposedly know you best can't agree on who you are? Claire faced this question in its most extreme form. Without any internal reference point, she was completely at the mercy of other people's conflicting narratives about her identity. She couldn't even trust her own instincts or emotional reactions, because she didn't know if those were authentic to her real personality or just random neural firing in a damaged brain. This is actually a more common experience than you might think. just usually not as dramatic as Claire's situation. How many times have you heard someone say, "I don't know who I am anymore," after a major life change, relationship ending, or career transition? We're constantly renegotiating our identity based on changing circumstances and new information about ourselves. But here is what makes human psychology so resilient and amazing. Even in Claire's impossible situation, she was already starting to form new opinions and preferences. She was making choices about which descriptions of her personality felt more authentic, which stories about the bar fight seemed more believable, which people seemed more trustworthy. In a way, Claire was getting a chance that none of us ever get 40. The opportunity to choose her identity from scratch, free from the weight of past mistakes, old patterns, and limiting beliefs about herself. It is terrifying, but it is also kind of liberating. Think about it. If you could rebuild your personality from zero, based on who you wanted to be rather than who you've always been, what would you choose? Would you keep the parts of yourself that sometimes cause problems? Would you trust the people around you to define who you are, or would you strike out on your own path? Claire's story also highlights something crucial about memory and trauma. Medical professionals often focus on helping patients recover their lost memories, but maybe that is not always the right approach. Sometimes our past contains experiences that were harmful or limiting. Sometimes the person we used to be wasn't the person we wanted to be. There is actually a philosophical thought experiment similar to Claire's situation called the ship of Theseus. If you replace every part of a ship over time, is it still the same ship? If Claire builds new memories and develops new personality traits, is she still the same person she was before the accident? Maybe the answer doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that Claire has the opportunity to consciously choose who she wants to become, rather than just accepting whatever combination of genetics, experiences, and other people's expectations made her who she was before. But there is still the practical problem of figuring out which of her friends and family members she can trust. This is where Claire's situation becomes a masterclass in reading people and detecting deception, even without the benefit of knowing someone's history. Here are some red flags she might have noticed. Inconsistencies in people's stories, especially about objective facts, like what happened the night of the accident. Emotional reactions that seemed inappropriate for D, like her sister laughing while calling her a troublemaker, or Chris seeming defensive when describing her feisty qualities. She might also pay attention to who seemed most concerned about her well-being versus who seemed more focused on maintaining their own relationship with her. Her mother crying showed genuine distress about Claire's condition. Shannon seemed focused on minimizing Claire's responsibility for the fight, which could indicate either protectiveness or guilt. Most importantly, Claire could start testing these different versions of her personality to see which ones felt authentic. If everyone says she is naturally outgoing and loves parties, but being around lots of people makes her feel anxious and drained, maybe that is information about who she really is versus who other people wanted her to be. This is actually advice that applies to all of us, even with intact memories. Pay attention to how you feel in different situations and around different people. Notice when someone's description of you doesn't match your internal experience. Question whether the roles you play in various relationships are authentic to who you want to be. The most profound lesson from Claire's story might be this: identity isn't something fixed that we discover about ourselves. It is something fluid that we create through our choices, relationships, and experiences. We have way more power to shape who we are than we usually realize. Claire's amnesia forced her to confront this truth in an extreme way, but all of us have the opportunity to examine our identities and make conscious choices about who we want to be. We don't have to accept other people's definitions of us, even people who've known us for years, maybe especially people who've known us for years. Sometimes the people closest to us have the most invested in keeping us the same, because change threatens the stability of their own identity and relationships. So what happened to Claire in the end? Did she ever recover her memories? Did she figure out who to trust? The truth is, those might be the wrong questions. The real question is, who did she choose to become? Because ultimately, that is the question all of us face every single day. We might not have the dramatic wake-up call of complete memory loss, but we all have the power to examine our identities. Question the stories people tell us about ourselves, and make conscious choices about who we want to be. Your past doesn't have to define your future. Other people's expectations don't have to limit your potential, and the person you've always been doesn't have to be the person you remain. Claire's story is terrifying because it strips away all our usual reference points for identity. But it is also incredibly empowering because it shows us that identity is ultimately a choice pseudo, and that choice is always available to us, whether we remember our past or not. The next time someone tells you you always do that, or that is just how you are, remember Claire's story. Remember that you have the power to question those definitions, to try on new versions of yourself, and to become whoever you choose to be. After all, we're all just stories we tell ourselves about who we are. The question is, who is writing your story?